Oh, hey there. I'm Patrick Pfingsten. Welcome to our Wednesday live stream slash podcast slash interesting events that we're trying to talk about and bring some interesting conversations and civility and discussions to our politics. And we're looking forward to having you along with us this afternoon and talking about some issues facing the state. We'll talk to Todd Maisch, who's the president and CEO of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, coming up here in just a couple of minutes. And then a little later on, we'll talk to Jim Leach, who's a good friend of mine and the afternoon host on WMAY in Springfield. So he's an interesting interesting guy in the world of conservative talk radio that's kind of dominating the landscape. He's on the left side of the fence. So I kind of fall on the just over the right side of the fence. He's kind of just over the left side of the fence. So we're looking forward to the conversation, and I think we'll have a good chat about especially Darren Bailey, the Republican nominee for governor, who's got huge money problems and has alienated his top donor. We reported in the newsletter on Tuesday that Richard Uihlein, the billionaire, is not engaged in the campaign at this point, at least financially. Not saying that he won't be, not saying that he can't be, but he isn't right now. And there are numerous thoughts and reasons behind why. I think that there are other issues at play in terms of power struggles within the Uihlein world, though we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of weeks and see if the Uihlein campaign does come in for Bailey at all, and if he doesn't, what does it mean? The Bailey campaign filed at the end of June, just after the primary, with $360,000 in the bank, and the governor, who hadn't even put in a general election cash infusion, had $60 million sitting in the bank. So it's going to be interesting to see if Darren Bailey can put together a competent, engaged campaign. And then, of course, there is comments about abortion that were exposed or brought up or whatever you want to call it yesterday, that he kind of said some stupid things in 2014 or 2017, pardon me. And, the Democrats, of course, have jumped on it. The Chicago media has jumped on it. They're trying to make Darren Bailey sound like some anti-Semite, which is just completely, I think, silly. And I've been one of the biggest Darren Bailey critics there is, especially on the right side of the fence. And I think it's going to be. I wrote about it in the newsletter this morning for subscribers, and I think what he was trying to do was do just a simple numbers comparison in terms of the 6 million Jews that were killed in the Holocaust and the roughly million per year abortions that take place in the United States, and he was clumsy and dumb and really made himself he opened himself up to this. And I doubt that the 2017 Darren Bailey thought that he was going to be running for governor, but alas, here we are. And I don't think it's part of some grand issue that Darren Bailey is some Jew hating right-wing fringe nut job. There are a lot of things to criticize Darren Bailey about. That's not one of them. So more on that coming up. I'm sure Jim Leach and I will get into that a little later on. First, though, I am pleased to welcome Todd Maisch. He's the president and CEO of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce. Todd, thanks for hopping on with us. We are excited to have you joining us as we try this new little venture here on the interwebs, where we're just trying to talk to people, do a little lunch hour conversation, and put it out as a podcast too, and see if we can inform and enjoy and have some good discussions. So let me start with you, Todd. There seems to be um, a real divide in the state, especially among political types. Of is is Illinois in good business shape post pandemic, or is it in terrible shape post pandemic? And you can imagine which party's in charge, and which party isn't, and what they're saying. From your perspective, from the chamber's perspective, what is the business environment in Illinois right now, and how do you rate it?
No, it's great, great opening question there, and thanks for having me. Very excited to be here, and congratulations on all that you're doing, getting the word out on a lot of important issues. But to your question, I would say that I wish there was a really simple answer, but it's pretty complicated. And I'll go a little bit down a rabbit hole. The notion of, does everybody want people to come back to the office post COVID, or do we expect everybody to work from home for the rest of their careers? There's no average. There's no average there. So I wish I could tell you that there's kind of a middle ground that explains everything, but there's not. It depends on who you are and where your industry is. So I would say overall, the feedback I get from members is mostly negative. But you can't ignore the fact that people like Kellogg's wanted to come to Chicago and set up their HQ here. But at the same time that Boeing and Caterpillar and Family Video, for those of you in Springfield know well about Family Video, decided, hey, we're out of here. Oh, then there's that Griffin guy as well. So it's very uneven, and I think it's really wrong for people to try and draw an average. It's deeper than that. You got to know who you're talking to, what the industry is, to really get a full perspective. But I would say overall, it's still, most feedback I get is negative.
So obviously, taxes are what come into the conversation with most folks in business, at least, that there's a belief that the taxes and workers' comp costs are what's driving business out of the state, they say, but it's not like Indiana's business taxes are that much better. Maybe the rate is, but there's also the business personal property tax over there. There's plenty of taxes in Wisconsin and Iowa and Missouri too. What is the reason for this frustration and this belief in your mind? And is it accurate that it's hard to run or maintain or keep a business in this state?
All right, I'm going to give you two responses. And the first is taxation. It is pretty hard to compare state to state and think you're getting apples to apples, oranges to oranges across the board. The one tax that I would say that is across the board for Illinoisans is the property tax. And we're second highest in the nation. Every once in a while, we even surpass New Jersey in some of those ratings. But everybody is burdened by those high property taxes. And that was our biggest complaint with the governor's program and Democrats' program about tax relief. We were very happy that they had an impetus for reducing the tax burden, but we think they kind of squandered an opportunity. 1% on groceries, we understand the political, that works well in an ad. Reducing the sales tax or the gas tax on a gallon of fuel, that has a lot of political appeal. What they should have done, in my opinion, is that they should have gone ahead and put all of that savings into sustainable property tax relief so people can plan ahead. But here's the last thing. It's tied directly to taxes, which is just faith in what government is going to do tomorrow. What are they going to do 6 months from now, 18 months from now? We had a pretty good budget. I mean, money's flowing in, but how much of that came from the federal government? How much was it from stimulus checks to individuals that they continue to spend? And what happens when that revenue starts to dry up? There's a lot of sense from my members that the Democrats are going to go straight back to where they always go, which is find another way to raise taxes. That's the real killer. No faith in sustainable fiscal sanity in the state of Illinois.
I do appreciate the fact that Democrats have passed a balanced budget. They have closed the payment gap. The state payment cycle is literally zero at this point.
It is.
And as someone who worked in state government a decade ago, the complaints that we heard from constituents and businesses and vendors, et cetera, it nearly put people out of business in places. So there's clearly credit to be made in those things. But you look at inflation and Mark Batnick likes to talk inflation to me and how the spending drove it up, and my eyes glaze over because I'm clearly not a math guy or an economics guy, but obviously the federal funds, the Biden bucks that people like to call them, have played a huge role in helping stabilize revenue. But we've also had stabilize the budget because we've also had more revenue than ever before, $50 billion last year. That number is expected to go down this year. Do you believe state government is in a position that it's ready to deal with what may be coming?
If left to their own devices, without people that watch your show, without voters paying attention, I would say I would have very negative outlook on that. But if people hold the powers that be their feet to the fire and say, we've experienced fiscal sanity and we like it, but now it's up to you to demonstrate that that's sustainable for more than just 1 year when the federal government sent us a whole bunch of money. So you got to resist all those urges to spend money on programs that are not sustainable, that we need to go ahead and continue to look for efficiencies everywhere we can, and that we hold down expenditures to meet revenues that come on in. So that's going to be the real test of whoever the next governor is. The powers that be in the legislature are going to have to demonstrate they're not a one-trick pony, that we got a whole bunch of money and boy, we're fiscally conservative because we got that money. Can we do it next year, the year after, and the year after? That's what my members want to hear. That's what they want to see as a real plan for them to go ahead and decide, Illinois may be back on track here.
You mentioned property taxes, and of course the state doesn't charge a property tax, which obviously, but and anyone that pays those bills to the county every year usually knows that too. But we're talking about schools making up 50% of most property tax bills. Then you get into your municipalities, counties, library boards, etc., that make up that pie. The immediate way to reduce property taxes would be to force school districts to be less reliant on property taxes, which would mean a giant cash infusion that the state doesn't have. So what's your answer then to how we lower property taxes? Because I don't see a simple solution here.
I think that I've got three answers for you. The first two are admittedly temporary and partial answers, but that's the fact that schools are indeed the majority of everybody's property taxes, and there's great support for funding your local schools, your local teachers. But when you look at things like the fact that on a routine basis, a teacher that is going to retire at maybe age 58, maybe 59, gets a 3-year escalator that everybody else in the state has to pay for on their pensions, that is something that can be and should be addressed right away and does not take constitutional amendment. My friends in Municipal League put out an array of 10 ideas to address property taxes at their level as well. And I'll be honest, it's a little controversial because it's about first responders. But when you look at the cost of pensions that are the bulk of what units of local government in Chicago, and Mayor Lightfoot just put this out there, I think just last week or the week before, she said, we're going to dedicate all of our property taxes to pay for pensions. now that's not sustainable. So you've got to go in there, and that does not require a constitutional amendment, in my opinion, if you simply say, we're going to honor the commitments we made, but we simply have to get our system back to sustainable. Then the third thing is you got to look at the Supreme Court. Now, that is a little longer term, and we were surprised, especially up in the 2nd District there. But if you were to flip the Supreme Court, put new people on, and take another look at that constitutional clause that says that, you know what, yes, we're going to honor all of our commitments that we've made previously, but moving forward, we're going to do something that's sustainable that taxpayers can afford. I think that's got to go back to the Supreme Court and needs to do so quickly.
But shall not be diminished means shall not be diminished, right? I mean,
but
we're not...
okay, but here's the thing is, and again, I've got people in my office who argue with me on this. I believe very strongly, shall not be diminished means what you've already promised to the date you make any changes moving forward. It does not make any kind of economic, political, or just common sense to say that in the first 5 minutes of you working for the state of Illinois, we have promised you benefits for the rest of your life. No one believes that. It's out of bounds. Nobody in the private sector gets that. And that is what should be reviewed on that basis. We keep the commitments we've made, but we have not tied our hands to changes in perpetuity that are now off the table. I completely reject that argument.
So I wanted to, we only have a couple of minutes left. So I wanted to specifically ask you, Todd, about the rural economy. I'm from one of the very rural counties in the state. And, even though I'm
which county is that?
I grew up in Iroquois County, right on the Indiana border. And,
Iroquois County. I love Iroquois.
Which is 95% farmland and 10 people. But it's a really tough place to be right now. And it's not just Iroquois County. It's Vermilion County. It's Edgar County. Just go down the line, as well as counties that border Kentucky and Missouri, et cetera. What can be done to spur investment in these remarkably challenged areas? Because we're talking about low education in most of these areas. We're talking about people who aren't farming, which isn't, there are fewer by the day. And the stories are out there of let's just move across the border to Indiana where everything's cheaper. So what's the tool? What's the goal? How do we create jobs in some of these areas unless it's just counting on Amazon to drop a warehouse somewhere?
Well, number one, Amazon dropping a warehouse is not a bad idea at all. So those are jobs. They're good paying jobs. And not a lot of people know this. Amazon pays you to go ahead and train you for your next job because they know that not everybody wants to spend the next 5 years of their life working in Amazon warehouse. So Amazon is fine. But another example I'll give you, and this is one where, hey, we give the governor real credit. The best economic development piece of legislation that has been enacted in a generation has been the data center incentive bill. And yes, we kind of wrote it, so I'm a little partial. But the governor picked it up, and it's part of his, his stump speech now. It's been wildly successful. But again, that's, one community really benefits from that, and it's property taxes. It's not tons of jobs, we admit that, but it's property taxes. Boom, they pay a heck of a lot in property taxes. So there's examples where if you go ahead and really be smart about it, you would be great to have one policy that would affect everybody in the state of Illinois uniformly. The reality is you've got to come up with ideas like the data center incentive bill that are targeted to certain areas of the state and make that work for all of us.
Two more things before I let you go, Todd. The first on energy. Obviously, there was talk about brownouts, blackouts, et cetera, in parts of the state when it got really hot this summer. Haven't gotten there yet. Energy costs are going up, though, and there seems to be less of a focus on nuclear and the hope that wind and solar and clean energy can clear things up in terms of an economic or environmental aspect. From your perspective, obviously businesses still have to pay their electric bill, but there's also an opportunity to grow some of these industries, whether it's wind, whether it's solar, et cetera. How do you do that? Where does it fit in, and what kind of challenges are businesses facing?
Sure. So energy is hugely important to the Illinois Chamber and to Illinois. We have unique energy assets. And for full disclosure, we have as many renewable members as we do what I call traditional energy providers. And renewable is very much part of our future. It's a vital part of our future. However, all you have to do is take a look at Germany, where they're having to pay people to refire coal plants. Or get the oil burning again because they went too far too fast and they didn't think about the transition. No, not everybody's fighting next door in Ukraine, but it's still a cautionary tale. A lot closer to home, Texas. Who would have thought Texas would have an energy problem? And now people are comparing Texas to California because they went so far too fast on renewables and didn't think about what the transition was going to really look like. So renewables are our future. They're vital, but you got to get that transition right. And that's why the latest energy bill needs to be repealed and replaced with much more common sense and less political dynamics to get really good energy policy for the state of Illinois. I don't know if I've lost you.
I'm muted. That's my fault. I'm having Obamacare flashbacks with repeal and replace language. So, and then just finally, one electoral question, Todd. You guys were involved in the effort to defeat the governor's graduated income tax proposal 2 years ago. There's going to be another difficult economic question out there. And this one relates to unions in November. The Amendment 1, as it's being called, which would kind of protect the unions' rights, they would say. Is the chamber taking a position on that? Where do you stand going into November?
We're adamantly opposed. There's a huge contrast between the last constitutional amendment we enacted with 80% support from Illinoisans, which was put transportation dollars into a lockbox, and you can call it something else if you want to. But that means that if we promise that you're going to send us more money to fix our roads and bridges and fund transit and our waterways and our airports, that's what we're going to spend our money on. That's pro-consumer, that's pro-taxpayer, it's pro-business. And labor was right there with us. And to be honest, they carried a heck of a lot of water to make sure we got that 80%. This is completely different in that this is eliminating economic opportunity for not just this generation of workers in Illinois, but for the foreseeable future that says, you know what, we're going to put in the Constitution that if you want to work in an entity that is unionized, but you don't necessarily want to join the union, you're crap out of luck. Because the Constitution says you've got to go ahead and do that. When the fact that we're surrounded by right to work states, Missouri's in and out, they can't decide exactly what they're going to do. But when Michigan goes right to work and Illinois isn't, well, then why would you shut the door? It's simply closing down economic opportunities, not just for this generation of workers, but for future generations. That's why we're adamantly opposed.
Todd Maisch from the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, president and CEO of the Illinois Chamber. Todd, thanks so much for the conversation and taking the time for us today. Really appreciate it, and thanks for hopping on.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, so that's the Illinois Chamber of Commerce. That's Todd Maisch, who's their president and CEO. Have enjoyed that conversation and getting his perspective. I'm going to jump in now with a little bit of an opinion side to some of that. Not that he didn't have any opinions, but we welcome Jim Leach. He's the afternoon host on WMAY in Springfield, the talk station there, and a friend of mine. And he occasionally asks me to hop on and fill in for him on occasion. So, Jim, welcome. First of all, I want to start with Darren Bailey, because that's everybody's hearts are aflutter with Darren Bailey at this point, because they're jumping to the conclusion that because he said something stupid, trying to compare some numbers in 2017, which never compare anything to the Holocaust, just rule number one in politics. But two, they're jumping to the conclusion that he is anti-Semitic, that he hates Jews. And I have a really hard time making that connection from someone that sees things a little more to the left side of the arena. How do you take what came out about Bailey and the reaction to it?
Well, as you might imagine, Patrick, this was a hot topic on my program yesterday as well. And I came to the same conclusion you did, that it's a stretch to infer from this that Darren Bailey is, quote, anti-Semitic. The problem he's got, of course, is that the rhetoric of downplaying or minimizing the Holocaust, or saying that other things are much worse than the Holocaust, is the rhetoric of anti-Semites historically. And when Darren Bailey has been out campaigning with and courting the favor of candidates like Mary Miller, who, of course, is infamous for having said, that Hitler was right about one thing, it becomes a lot tougher for him to, really counteract the allegation that it is somehow inherently anti-Semitic to make the claim that he made. I think the bigger problem politically for him, though, is that when you're comparing the Holocaust, which was, Adolf Hitler just single-mindedly seeking the extermination of an entire race of people based upon their religion and their beliefs, and you compare that to abortion, and every woman's story is so individual. It's not driven by hate. It's not driven by megalomania. It's driven by, any number of factors, her own health, or that she's in an abusive relationship, or that she was raped, or whatever it might be. And to in any way equate the two is enormously problematic, especially in a blue state like Illinois.
Well, and the issue here, I think that we're seeing is that J.B. Pritzker is among the 22% of Illinoisans that, if you believe the Ogden and Fry poll from a month or two ago, the 22% of Illinoisans that believe in no limits to abortion under any circumstance. And Bailey, who is starting to soften a little bit on the exceptions, is part of that 14% of the electorate that believes there should be no abortion and no exceptions, period. The problem is the rest of us fall in the middle 2/3 of that. That's the majority. And you can be someone like me, and I always say my position hardened a little bit when I heard our baby's heartbeat for the first time, that you couldn't then convince me that wasn't a life, and that was a life that had to be protected. But I also understand that there are so many situations that are different than that. And I think that the majority of people, like even the pro-choice, normal pro-choice people, don't want to see an abortion at 8 months or 8.5 months or partial birth. So why did we get stuck with these two guys who are on so far ends of this issue?
Well, I think the notion, first of all, of abortion at 8 months or 9 months is really a red herring. It just isn't happening unless there is a critical medical reason for it. No woman is carrying her pregnancy to 8 months and 3 weeks and then saying, you know what, I want an abortion after all. And no doctor is going to perform an abortion under the circumstances. So I think that is a huge red herring that gets tossed around a lot by the anti-abortion crowd to make it sound like something that it really isn't. I don't know. I feel like the governor's position on this is probably more in line with the majority of Illinoisans who really think this is something best left up to a woman, to her doctor, to her partner, to her spiritual advisor, if that's the path she chooses to go, and to make those decisions. But as I said, the notion that J.B. Pritzker is advocating for, hey, let a woman come in at 9 months of pregnancy and have the baby aborted, it's just not something that's happening.
But there have been, I mean, there have been discussions about, where that viability starts and late term abortion or
Yeah, but viability isn't at 9 months. Viability is at
no,
3 months and 4
no.
months. That's
But I mean, but that's where you see the 22 weeks, where some of these states have put a late term ban. And I don't think that there are people who are carrying a child for 8.5 months that are then having an abortion. But
unless again you've got a situation where the baby is not going to survive, where the woman's life is or her health is in danger, where it might mean she can't have another pregnancy ever again, and there might be that situation, and those are agonizing situations that no one wants to find themselves in. But is it really anybody else's place to make that decision for the woman and for her doctor?
Well, and there's no mainstream person, whether they're right of center or left of center, that looks at the case in Ohio/Indiana, where the little girl who was 9 years old at the time was raped and got pregnant. There's no reason to force that child to have a child. That's clearly an issue, an exception that anyone should have.
Well,
so I think my point is that
there's a lot of people that don't make that an exception in that case, and we've heard from a lot of them in the course of this campaign season around the country.
And you're right, and I think that goes back to the fact that Republicans are just nominating people who are way too far right to, especially when in states like Illinois. But then you run to the right in those primaries, and you're getting nut job policies and people in the Indiana legislature who are, booing the governor because he doesn't want to, force a woman who was raped to have a child. It's frustrating that this is such a political issue for something that is so emotional, because the more that we bring emotion into politics, the less that we get anything done, clearly.
But it has to be a political issue because it's politicians that are setting the policies for this and making the decisions on it. And that's why I think pro-choice people feel like this is something best left to the individual to make that decision based upon their own circumstances. But that's, again, that's something that's going to be sorted out through the legislatures and through the courts, and a governor's going to have a big say in that.
So circling back to Bailey, these are unforced errors. He's trying on his own to not step in it now. It doesn't help that he stepped in it in 2017 and somebody found that video, and maybe the Irvin campaign had it, maybe they didn't, but you could have run that in an ad and say somebody's completely unelectable. But is there a shot in, I mean, you're hearing from a lot of conservative callers on your show, and I've yelled at a few of them. Some guy who tried to tell me that Donald Trump would be reinstalled as president before 2024. I mean, I hung up on him and yelled because I'm done with stupid. But downstate, there's a belief that JB Pritzker is out of line with them. And in the suburbs and in the city, up here, it's the other side. It's that that Darren Bailey is a hayseed hick who's completely out of touch. Clearly, the population will dictate something. But do you see any path for Bailey at this point?
Well, the last few years have taught us that nothing is impossible or out of the realm of being willed into reality, given the right circumstances here. But historically, obviously, Illinois tends to elect Republicans statewide who are more moderate, or at least position themselves as more moderate, like Bruce Rauner did in 2014. He governed somewhat differently than what he campaigned. Darren Bailey, I've been racking my brain to think of a more conservative gubernatorial nominee in this state in my memory, and I can't come up with one. So I think that immediately puts him with a real uphill climb. Obviously a lot can happen between now and November, and the governor's got his own problems. DCFS, the Department of Human Services, the Department of Veterans Affairs. There's some real, challenges there in terms of how the administration is carrying out the day-to-day governance of the state. And so every day that J.B. Pritzker can make it about Darren Bailey's foot in his mouth, as opposed to some of the problems that are happening at various state agencies and things, is a good day for J.B. Pritzker politically. Anything is possible in politics, but Senator Bailey is going to need a lot fewer unforced errors and a lot more focus on real issues if he wants to have a chance at all.
From someone on the left side of the street, is J.B. Pritzker doing a good job as governor?
Well, I think, as I said, I know a lot of people have very well-founded concerns about agencies like DCFS, and it doesn't seem to be getting better, and there's not any change happening in the management there. Here in Sangamon County, we're dealing with the continuing problem of county jail inmates who have been found mentally unfit to stand trial, should be transferred to psychiatric care, but they're staying in the county jail at enormous expense and enormous risk to themselves and to jailers. And that's a situation that's not getting better. So those are very real problems. On the other hand, if you think about things like, you believe women should have some autonomy over their own medical decisions, or you believe that same-sex marriage should be protected in the state, or you thought it was a good idea that we're not going around busting people for possessing small amounts of marijuana, I think you'd say, yeah, he's done a pretty good job. He delivered on promises. He's done the things that you would expect a progressive governor to do in Illinois. And so in that regard, I think, J.B. Pritzker's base is still pretty well with him. And it's a blue state. I mean, people can try to argue otherwise, but the reality is Illinois is a blue state. And if you are a blue governor who is doing the things you said you were going to do, you're already, more than halfway home at that point.
Springfield is, I think it's safe to say there are parts of Springfield, at least, that are struggling. You don't have to be in downtown Springfield very long to see that there's nobody there, that state government has been hollowed out. The state couldn't even give me a figure when I asked about how many employees are still working from home. When you look at what should be the hub of government in the state capital, and you see the transfer of so many of these jobs north, and another 2 office buildings that have now been purchased by the state. What's the feeling in Springfield about government today, and whether it's kind of feeling a little bit abandoned?
Well, it's not a new phenomenon. That's been, going on really since the days of Jim Thompson, the gradual realignment of state government transitioning away from Springfield towards Chicago. I think that, around here, the people who either work for the state or have spouses or children or parents or whatever that work for the state still prefer the Pritzker approach to union contracts and things, his relationship with AFSCME, as compared to Bruce Rauner. And so I think they're concerned about what might happen if we were to go back to a more Raunerite philosophy on that. I don't know that Senator Bailey has talked a lot about how he would deal with AFSCME or what his approach would be to that, but I think there are some real qualms about that. Yeah, there's no doubt that everybody in Springfield would be a lot happier if we had a more robust state workforce, if they were in their offices in downtown Springfield, bolstering downtown businesses and contributing to the economy the way they did several decades ago. But like I said, that's not anything new, and I don't know that that's going to ultimately be a deciding factor in a race for governor.
Jim Leach from WMAY in Springfield. Jim, where do people find you online? Where do they listen to your show? And give them all the details.
We'd love to have everyone check us out at WMAY.com for local and regional news in Springfield and Central Illinois. And of course, streaming. We have local talk morning, afternoon, evening, streaming at WMAY.com. And we have a WMAY mobile app as well. And I also will put in the plug to encourage people to check out the Illinoize newsletter and to check out
Thank you.
Patrick's commentary and to listen when Patrick does fill in for us occasionally. Always does a great job. So I appreciate very much the opportunity to have some time here online with you, Patrick.
And I'll be there Friday.
Looking forward to it.
So we're going to talk to the Turner caucus, Doris Turner and Sally Turner at the same, not the same time, back to back, but and then Comptroller Mendoza, I think, will jump on too. So
it's going to be great.
We'll have fun. We'll have fun on your station on Friday, and then I'll be there Monday and Wednesday next week too. So Jim Leach, thanks so much. Appreciate it, my friend. Have a good rest of your day.
Take care.
All right. So appreciate you taking time with us today. Obviously there are complicated issues out there, and they're not going to get solved overnight. But they're also not going to get solved by shouting at each other. And I think that's, you look at the abortion discussion and obviously, I think it's safe to say that Jim and I look at that issue a little bit differently, and that's fine. We're allowed to be grownups and disagree. But that doesn't mean that his opinions and his experience are of no value. It doesn't mean that my opinions and my experience are of no value. And when it comes to abortion or taxes or spending or the economy or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we're no better when we don't have conversations with people who disagree with us. So get out of your echo chamber, the Facebook echo chamber of people who think that exactly like you or even more extreme to a certain side as you. Listen to the other side once in a while. And I feel smarter when I listen to the other side sometimes, and sometimes feel dumber when I listen to my own side sometimes. So, we don't do better. We don't get better unless we start doing some things together. And that's my encouragement out of this Bailey thing specifically, is not everything is the most dramatic, end of the world, extreme position. And that's, I think, there are plenty of reasons to criticize Darren Bailey. But calling him, an anti-Semite over a comment that he made, in a dumb comment and a poorly executed comment, I don't think these Chicago liberal activist, Terry Cosgrove types are the ones that can tell us what's in Darren Bailey's heart and mind. So we'll leave it at that. Drop us a note, mailbag at theillinoise.com. And, we would love to have you join as a free or paid subscriber on to the newsletter at theillinoise.com. And let us know what you want to hear, what you think of this. I'm interested in making this better and having a good conversation with you all each week. So thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon on The Illinoize.